Catherine Bennett had always experienced the world in her own unique way, not out of weakness but because she had learned to navigate life through the senses available to her. Sounds, scents, textures. Her blindness had never meant an absence of perception. If anything, it had heightened her other faculties to extraordinary levels. But behind her gentle smiles and soft voice lived a woman who had long stopped feeling seen. Married to Richard Bennett, a tech mogul obsessed with success, Catherine's life had become increasingly isolated. Richard, the founder of a Fortune 500 company specializing in artificial intelligence, spent his days trapped in boardrooms, analyzing spreadsheets and chasing the next big acquisition. Their sprawling Seattle mansion, perched on a cliff overlooking Puget Sound, should have been a sanctuary. Instead, it had become Catherine's elegant prison, all marble countertops and panoramic views she couldn't admire. "I'll be late tonight," Richard announced one rainy Tuesday morning, his voice distracted as his fingers clacked against his keyboard. "The Singapore deal is almost finalized." Catherine nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "I thought we might have dinner together. It's been almost 2 weeks since we've had a meal at the same table." The typing paused briefly. "I can't, Kate. Not tonight. Maybe this weekend." The typing resumed faster than before. "This weekend you have the conference in Phoenix," she reminded him gently. "Right." A sigh. "I'll make it up to you." It was a promise he'd made so many times that the words had lost all meaning. Catherine swallowed the familiar disappointment and turned her face toward the sound of rain against the windows. The patter of droplets against glass had become more of a companion than her husband. 12 years ago, when they'd first met at a charity fundraiser for vision research, Richard had been captivated by her. He'd described the room to her in such vivid detail that she could almost see it through his words. They'd talked until dawn and he'd walked her home, describing every crack in the sidewalk, every tree they passed. He'd made her feel like the only person in his universe. Now she was lucky if he remembered to tell her when he left the room. "Actually," Richard said suddenly, his chair creaking as he stood, "I've been meaning to tell you. I need to go to Arizona next month." Arizona? Catherine's interest piqued. They'd spent their honeymoon in Sedona, hiking trails where Richard had guided her hands to feel the smooth red rocks and desert flora. It had been magical. "Yes, we're looking at acquiring a small tech company based in Phoenix, but the real meetings will be happening at a retreat in the Sonoran Desert, some kind of exclusive resort where the investors are gathering. Could I come with you?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. She rarely asked to accompany him anymore, tired of being left alone in hotel rooms while he networked. The silence that followed told her everything. "It's strictly business, Kate. Back-to-back meetings. I'd have no time to..." "To what?" "To guide me around. To make sure the blind woman doesn't bump into things." A rare flash of anger colored her words. Richard's footsteps approached, and she felt his hand on her shoulder, a touch that felt more obligatory than affectionate. "That's not what I meant. You know how these trips go. I just don't want you to be bored." What he really meant was that he didn't want to be burdened. Catherine knew this, had accepted it years ago. But something about this particular rejection stung deeper. Perhaps because Arizona held memories of a time when he had seen her, truly seen her, for who she was. "I understand," she said softly, turning away from his touch. Later that evening, after Richard had left for yet another late meeting, Catherine sat in their home library, her fingers dancing over the raised dots of a Braille novel. But her mind wasn't on the story. It was on the growing distance between her and the man she had married. When had they become strangers sharing an address? When had his voice lost the warmth that once made her feel cherished? Their life looked perfect from the outside. Wealthy tech entrepreneur and his devoted wife, generous philanthropists, fixtures at Seattle's most exclusive social events. But behind closed doors, Catherine felt increasingly invisible. Richard provided everything money could buy, while withholding the one thing she truly needed, his presence. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Mrs. Bennett?" It's Maya. The voice belonged to her personal assistant, a recent college graduate whom Catherine had hired partly because the young woman treated her like a person, not a condition. "Come in, Maya." The door opened, and Maya's sandal-clad feet padded across the hardwood floor. A subtle scent of citrus and vanilla, Maya's signature perfume, filled the air. "I brought those articles you asked me to read to you," Maya said, settling into the chair opposite Catherine. "And I took the liberty of downloading that podcast series on desert ecology you were interested in." Catherine smiled. "Thank you. Has Richard called?" A brief hesitation. "No, ma'am, but his assistant emailed the itinerary for the Arizona trip. It's a 10-day stay at the Mirage Canyon Resort and Retreat. Very exclusive. Apparently they have these luxury tents right in the desert." Catherine's fingers stilled on her book. 10 days? "Yes, ma'am. May 15th to 25th. Their anniversary fell on May 20th, 17 years of marriage, and Richard had scheduled a business trip without even mentioning the conflict. Something shifted inside Catherine at that moment, a quiet revelation. A decision not yet fully formed but taking root nonetheless. If Richard could so easily forget what should be sacred, perhaps it was time for her to remember what it felt like to be alive. "Maya," she said, closing her book, "I'd like you to do some research for me." "Of course. What about?" "I want to know everything about the Sonoran Desert, the communities there, the tours available, the experiences one might have." Catherine's voice grew more confident with each word. "And I'd like you to look into flights to Phoenix around the same time as Richard's trip." "Mrs. Bennett?" Maya's voice held a note of surprise. Catherine smiled, feeling a spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility, adventure, agency. "I think it's time I took a journey of my own, don't you?" The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, but for the first time in years, Catherine didn't feel trapped by it. Instead, it sounded like applause, nature itself encouraging her first step toward rediscovering the woman who had been lost beneath the title of Richard Bennett's wife. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly anticipate, was how completely this decision would transform her life. The desert held secrets, revelations and encounters that would redefine everything she thought she knew about herself, about love, and about what it truly meant to see and be seen. The stage was set for a journey that would take her far beyond the physical boundaries of her Seattle home, into a landscape as foreign to her as the new version of herself waiting to be discovered under the vast Arizona sky. The private jet touched down at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport under a blazing afternoon sun. Catherine felt the change immediately, the dry heat enveloping her as she descended the stairs, so different from Seattle's perpetual dampness. The air smelled of dust and something else, something ancient and inviting. "Mrs. Bennett, the car is waiting," said the driver Richard had arranged. Catherine had decided not to tell her husband about her early arrival. As far as he knew, she was still in Seattle, attending her weekly book club and charity committee meetings. She told Maya to maintain the illusion that everything was normal back home. "Thank you," Catherine replied, gripping her adapted walking cane. "But there's been a change of plans. I won't be going to the Mirage Canyon Resort just yet." She could sense the driver's confusion. "Ma'am?" "I've arranged for another car. It should be here shortly." Catherine smiled, feeling a thrill of independence. It had been years since she'd orchestrated anything without Richard's knowledge or assistance. It had taken 3 weeks of careful planning with Maya's help, researching desert tour companies, finding one that could accommodate her needs, arranging separate transportation, and packing appropriate clothing without arousing Richard's suspicion. The lies had come easier than she expected, perhaps because Richard barely paid attention to her daily activities anymore. 20 minutes later, Catherine settled into another vehicle, this one driven by a woman named Elena, who worked for Sonoran Spirit Tours. "Welcome to Arizona, Mrs. Bennett," Elena said warmly. "We're honored you chose our company. Not many of our clients are." She paused. "Blind," Catherine finished for her, used to people's discomfort with the word. "Actually, I was going to say solo travelers," Elena replied with a chuckle. Our desert experience is usually booked by couples or groups, but we've made all the arrangements you requested. Our guide, Joaquin, is the best in the business, third-generation desert dweller with Tohono O'odham roots. If anyone can help you experience the true spirit of the Sonoran, it's him. Catherine felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement. This spontaneous trip was so unlike her usual careful, planned existence. Richard would be furious if, when, he discovered what she'd done. But right now, with miles of desert stretching before her, his anger seemed as distant as Seattle's rain clouds. They drove for nearly 2 hours, Eleanor narrating the changing landscape as they left Phoenix behind and ventured deeper into desert country. Catherine listened intently, building mental images from Elena's descriptions. Saguaro cacti standing like sentinels against the sky, jagged mountain ranges rising in the distance, the occasional bloom of wildflowers defying the harsh environment. "We're almost at the meeting point," Elena announced eventually. "From here, Joaquin will take you on the desert tour. You'll be joining a small group, just 2 other couples. The experience lasts about 4 hours and then you'll be taken to your accommodation." Catherine nodded, her fingers tracing the seam of her linen pants. She'd chosen her clothing carefully. Lightweight, breathable fabrics in neutral colors, sturdy but comfortable walking shoes. Maya had helped her select everything, describing the items in detail to ensure Catherine maintained her usual elegant appearance while being practically dressed for desert conditions. The vehicle slowed and stopped. Elena helped Catherine out, and the full force of the desert heat hit her. It was different here, more intense, more present than in Phoenix. The air was perfumed with unfamiliar scents: creosote, sage, sun-baked earth. "Mrs. Bennett?" A deep, melodious voice approached. "I'm Joaquin Miles. I'll be your guide today." Catherine extended her hand and Joaquin took it, his palm rough and warm against hers. "Please, call me Catherine." Catherine. The way he said her name, giving weight to each syllable, made her feel suddenly, startlingly present in her body. "Welcome to the heart of the Sonoran. I understand you have some specific requirements for this tour." "I want to experience the desert as fully as possible," she replied. "I may not be able to see it, but I can feel it, smell it, hear it, taste it." There was a pause, and Catherine sensed Joaquin studying her. "Then that's exactly what we'll do," he said finally, a smile evident in his voice. "The desert speaks to all the senses if you know how to listen." Catherine was introduced to the other tour participants, a middle-aged couple from Minnesota and a pair of newlyweds from California. They expressed surprise at her presence but quickly moved past it, their excitement about the tour overriding any awkwardness. Joaquin helped Catherine into a specially adapted vehicle with the other tourists, and they set off deeper into the desert. As they traveled, he began to weave stories about the land, tales of ancient peoples who had thrived in this seemingly inhospitable place, of plants and animals that had evolved ingenious strategies for survival, of monsoon rains that transformed the parched landscape into brief, spectacular blooms of life. Catherine found herself leaning forward, captivated by his knowledge and the obvious reverence in his voice when he spoke of the desert. Occasionally, he would stop the vehicle and lead them on short walks to experience specific features. He was attentive to Catherine without being patronizing, describing visual elements while ensuring she could touch and smell various plants, feel the different textures of soil and rock. "This is organ pipe cactus," he said at one point, carefully guiding her hand to feel the distinctive ribbed surface. "Much rarer than the saguaro. The Odom people call it kutkuis. Its fruit makes a syrup sweeter than any honey you've ever tasted." "It feels alive," Catherine murmured, her fingertips gently exploring the plant, "like it's breathing." "It is alive," Joaquin replied. "Everything here is. The desert isn't empty or dead. It's just operating on a different rhythm than we're used to. Slower, more deliberate. Every living thing here has to make careful choices about when to expend energy and when to conserve it." Those words resonated with Catherine in a way she couldn't immediately articulate. Hadn't she been conserving her own energy for years, carefully rationing her emotional resources in a marriage that increasingly drained her? The tour continued, and Catherine lost herself in the experience. She listened to the subtle sounds of the desert, the whisper of wind through creosote bushes, the distant call of a cactus wren, the surprising rustle of small creatures moving through dry vegetation. She inhaled deeply, cataloguing the complex fragrances. She felt the sun's heat on her skin, the subtle shifts in temperature as they moved between exposed areas and patches of shade. Time seemed to expand and contract strangely. What felt like minutes would turn out to be an hour. What seemed like a lengthy exploration would be revealed as just a brief stop. Catherine felt more alert, more present than she had in years. As the tour neared its end, Joaquin led them to what he described as a small oasis, a place where natural springs created a pocket of green abundance amid the desert's austerity. "There's a tradition here," he explained, his voice taking on a ceremonial quality. "We ask visitors to take a moment of complete silence. Close your eyes," he paused, "or simply be still and let the desert speak to you directly." The group fell quiet. Catherine stood motionless, focusing on her breathing. The sensation was extraordinary, as if the boundary between herself and the surrounding environment was dissolving. She could feel her heartbeat slowing to match some deeper rhythm in the land itself, and then a realization crystallized within her. She had been sleepwalking through her own life. For years, she had allowed herself to become increasingly passive, increasingly invisible, as Richard retreated further into his world of ambition and acquisition. She had accommodated his absence, made excuses for his neglect, surrendered pieces of herself so gradually that she'd barely noticed their loss. Here, surrounded by a landscape that demanded authenticity for survival, the truth couldn't be avoided. She wasn't living, she was existing, and the difference between those states suddenly seemed vast and unbridgeable. The silence ended, but its effect on Catherine lingered. As they returned to the vehicles for the final leg of the journey, she found herself wondering what would happen if she didn't go to the luxury resort, where Richard would eventually arrive. What if she chose a different path entirely? The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it filled her with a strange, bubbling excitement, like carbonation in her blood. "You're very quiet," Joaquin observed, as he helped her into the vehicle. "I'm processing," Catherine replied. "It's a lot to take in." The desert has that effect on people. It strips away pretenses, forces you to confront what's real. Catherine nodded. "Where are we heading now?" "To your accommodation," he said. "The Mirage Canyon Resort, right?" Catherine hesitated, standing at the precipice of a decision that would alter everything. The resort represented safety, predictability, the path of least resistance. But it also meant inevitably reuniting with Richard, slipping back into the comfortable numbness of her Seattle life. "Actually," she heard herself say, "I've changed my mind. Is there somewhere else I could stay? Somewhere more authentic? I want to continue experiencing the real desert, not some sanitized resort version." She sensed Joaquin's surprise in the momentary silence that followed. Then he said, "I might know a place. My cousin runs a small bed and breakfast near Tucson. Nothing fancy, but clean and comfortable. It's on a property that borders Saguaro National Park, about as authentic as it gets." "That sounds perfect," Catherine said, her heart racing with the audacity of this improvisation. "What about your luggage, your arrangements?" "My assistant can redirect my bags." The practicalities were surmountable. What mattered was the choice itself. "I'd like to go there if it's not too much trouble." "No trouble," Joaquin replied, and Catherine detected a new note in his voice, respect perhaps, or understanding. "So I'll make a call." As they drove away from the tour site, Catherine felt as though she was shedding a skin that had grown too tight. She didn't know what would happen next, or how Richard would react when he discovered she'd gone off script. For now, all that mattered was the road ahead and the strange, liberating sensation of choosing her own direction for the first time in years. Behind her lay the predictable confines of her marriage. Ahead stretched the unknown expanse of possibility, as vast and full of hidden life as the desert itself. Catherine Bennett, blind, privileged, and for most of her adult life profoundly unseen, was finally beginning to find her way toward the light. The Desert Rose Inn was nothing like the luxury accommodations Catherine was accustomed to, and That was precisely why she loved it immediately. Instead of marble lobbies and sterile elegance, the small bed and breakfast offered adobe walls warmed by the sun, hand-woven textiles, and the rich aroma of home-cooked meals wafting from the kitchen. "Welcome to our humble home," said Lucia Miles, Joaquin's cousin and the proprietor of the inn. Her voice was melodious, with the same warm cadence as Joaquin's. "We don't get many guests who come looking for the real Sonoran experience. Most people want air conditioning and infinity pools," Joaquin added with a chuckle. "We have air conditioning," Lucia protested good-naturedly. "We're authentic, not masochistic." Catherine smiled, feeling an immediate connection to this place and these people. "It's perfect. Thank you for accommodating me on such short notice. Any friend of Joaquin's is welcome here," Lucia replied, taking Catherine's arm with gentle familiarity. "Let me show you to your room. It's our best one, opens directly onto the garden courtyard." As they walked, Catherine could sense the layout of the inn, a central courtyard surrounded by rooms, the main building housing common areas, and Lucia's family quarters. The air was fragrant with desert plants, cooking, spices and sun-baked earth. The room itself was simple but comfortable, a queen-sized bed with cotton sheets, handcrafted furniture that Lucia described in detail, and French doors leading to the courtyard. Catherine ran her hands over the textured walls, the woven bedspread, the smooth wooden bedposts building a tactile map of her new environment. "Dinner is at 7, Lucia explained. "Just follow the smell of my famous chili Colorado. Joaquin will be joining us, along with my husband Carlos and a few other guests." After Lucia left, Catherine called Maya to explain her change of plans. "You're where?" Maya's voice crackled over the spotty cell connection. "At a bed and breakfast near Tucson," Catherine repeated. "I need you to contact the resort and redirect. My luggage and Maya, don't tell Richard anything yet. Mrs. Bennett, are you sure about this? Mr. Bennett will be arriving at the resort in 3 days. "I'm aware," Catherine replied, a steely resolution in her voice. "But I need this time. I'm not ready to face him yet." After giving Maya the necessary details, Catherine explored her room more thoroughly, then cautiously ventured into the courtyard. Using her cane and her acute spatial awareness, she discovered a small fountain, various potted plants, and several wrought iron chairs and tables. She settled into one of the chairs, tilting her face toward the late afternoon sun. The desert air was beginning to cool as evening approached, creating that distinctive transition that desert dwellers called the golden hour. Catherine couldn't see the changing light, but she could feel the subtle shift in temperature. Here, the different birds that emerged as day faded toward night. "May I join you?" Joaquin's voice came from nearby. "Please," Catherine gestured to the chair beside her. She heard him settle into it, the iron creaking slightly under his weight. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence. "Thank you," she said finally, "for bringing me here, for understanding that I needed something different." "You don't need to explain," he replied. "The desert has a way of calling to certain people at certain times in their lives. When that happens, it's best to listen." Catherine turned toward his voice. "Is that what happened to you? Did the desert call you?" Joaquin was quiet for a moment, and Catherine sensed him considering his answer. "In a way," he said finally. "I tried leaving once, went to college in Boston, got a job with an environmental consulting firm in Chicago. I thought I wanted that life, the big city, the prestige, the constant motion, but it nearly broke me. I couldn't breathe there, couldn't think properly. Everything was too loud, too fast, too artificial." "So you came back," Catherine said softly. "I came home," he corrected. "Back implies returning to something you've left behind. Home means finding where you truly belong." The words resonated deeply with Catherine. When had her marriage last felt like home? "My husband will be arriving at the resort in 3 days, she found herself confessing. "He thinks I'm still in Seattle. He has no idea I'm here." Joaquin didn't immediately respond, and Catherine appreciated his restraint. He wasn't rushing to judgment or offering unsolicited advice. "Marriages are complicated," he said finally. "I was married once. It didn't last." "What happened?" she asked. "We wanted different things. Sarah needed the city, the career advancement, the social validation. I needed this." He paused. There wasn't a villain in our story, just two people who couldn't find a way to bridge their different worlds. Catherine nodded, understanding perfectly. "Richard and I said we used to share a world. At least I thought we did. But somewhere along the way, he built a new one that had no place for me in it. His universe became boardrooms and business deals and technology I couldn't interact with, and I just faded into the background." "You don't strike me as someone who fades easily," Joaquin observed. Catherine laughed softly. "You didn't know me a week ago." "No," he agreed, "but I see you now." Those simple words, "I see you now," sent a shiver through Catherine that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air. When was the last time anyone had truly seen her? Not her blindness, not her status as Richard Bennett's wife, but her Catherine. The woman beneath those labels. Dinner that evening was a revelation. Lucia's chili colorado was as magnificent as promised, rich with complex flavors that made Catherine close her eyes in appreciation. The small group gathered around the table included Carlos, Lucia's husband, an elderly couple from New Mexico, celebrating their 50th anniversary, and a professor of archaeology from the University of Arizona. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on desert ecology, local history, politics, and art. Catherine found herself engaged and animated, offering opinions, asking questions, laughing genuinely for what felt like the first time in years. No one treated her with the careful deference she often encountered in Seattle's social circles. Here she was just another guest, valued for her contributions to the conversation rather than her husband's wealth or her role as a philanthropist. After dinner, Carlos brought out his guitar and the small gathering moved to the courtyard. As the night deepened around them, he played traditional folk songs, his fingers dancing across the strings with practiced ease. Joaquin occasionally joined in, his baritone blending harmoniously with Carlos's tenor. The music washed over Catherine like a healing balm. She let herself be carried by it, swaying slightly in her chair, occasionally humming along when the melody became familiar. In this moment, surrounded by strangers who already felt like friends, she experienced a profound sense of belonging. Later, as the gathering dispersed for the night, Joaquin walked Catherine back to her room. "What's on the agenda for tomorrow?" she asked, reluctant for the evening to end. "I thought I might show you some of my favorite places," he replied. "If you're interested, places tourists don't usually get to see." "I'd like that very much," Catherine said. At her door, they paused. Catherine sensed Joaquin standing close to her, felt the subtle warmth radiating from his body. "Thank you for today," she said softly. "All of it." "The pleasure was mine, Catherine." His voice had dropped to a near whisper. "Sleep well." After he left, Catherine sat on the edge of her bed, her mind and heart racing. What was she doing? Playing desert vacation while her husband prepared for crucial business meetings? Flirting, yes, she could admit that's what it was, with a man she barely knew, creating a fantasy life that would inevitably collide with reality when Richard discovered her deception. And yet, beneath the anxiety, a stronger current was pulling her forward. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. Present in her body, engaged with the world around her, seen and heard as her authentic self. How could she regret choices that had led to such awakening? The next few days unfolded in a dreamlike succession of experiences that Catherine knew she would carry with her forever. Joaquin proved to be a thoughtful and attentive guide, curating experiences that engaged all her senses. They explored hidden canyons, where he taught her to identify birds by their calls. They visited a small native community, where an elder showed Catherine how to weave traditional baskets, her fingers learning the patterns through touch rather than sight. Each evening they returned to the inn for Lucia's exceptional cooking and the warm community that gathered around her table. Each night, Joaquin walked Catherine to her door, their goodbyes growing longer. the air between them increasingly charged with unspoken possibilities. On the third day, the day Richard was scheduled to arrive at the resort, Joaquin took Catherine to a remote desert spring, known only to locals. The oasis was small but magnificent, a perfect circle of emerald green in the midst of the arid landscape. Catherine could hear the gentle burble of water, feel the dramatic change in humidity, smell the lush vegetation that clustered around the life-giving moisture. "This place is sacred to the Odom," Joaquin explained, as he helped her settle on a smooth rock near the water's edge. "They believe it's where the first woman emerged into this world." "It feels sacred," Catherine agreed, trailing her fingers through the cool water. "Like time works differently here." "Many people say that." Joaquin sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "The old ones believe that at certain places, the membrane between worlds grows thin. Past, present, future all exist simultaneously." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the whisper of wind through cattails, the occasional splash of a small creature entering the water. Catherine felt a profound peace settling over her, along with a growing certainty about what she needed to do next. "My husband arrives today," she said finally. "I know." Joaquin's voice was gentle, without judgment. "I should go to him, explain why I came here, what I've been experiencing." Catherine took a deep breath. "I owe him that much, at least." "And what will you tell him?" Joaquin asked. Catherine turned toward him, wishing for the first time in years that she could see his face, read his expression, gauge his reaction. "The truth, that I've been slowly disappearing in our marriage, that I need more than financial security and social status, that I need to be seen." She felt Joaquin's hand cover hers, warm and strong. "And if he can't give you that?" The question hung between them, laden with implications neither was ready to fully articulate. "I don't know," Catherine admitted, "but I need to find out. I can't hide in this beautiful dream forever, tempting as that might be." Joaquin squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever you decide, Catherine Bennett, know that you have awakened something in this place. Not just in me, but in Lucia, in Carlos, in everyone who has met you these past days. You've left your mark here. And this place, these people, we've left our mark on you too." Catherine nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "Will you take me to the resort? I think it's time I faced Richard." "Of course," Joaquin said, his voice steady despite the undercurrent of emotion. "Whenever you're ready." They lingered by, the spring a while longer, both reluctant to break the spell of the moment, aware that once they left this sacred place, the fragile connection between them would be tested by the harsh realities of the world beyond the desert. Finally, Catherine stood, adjusting her sunglasses and gripping her cane with renewed determination. "I'm ready now." What she couldn't possibly know as they made their way back toward Joaquin's truck was that Richard Bennett had already discovered her absence from Seattle. And he was not a man accustomed to being deceived. Even now he was methodically tracking her movements, using all the technological resources at his disposal to locate his wayward wife. The collision of worlds that Catherine anticipated was already in motion, accelerating toward an inevitable confrontation that would force her to make the most important choice of her life. The Mirage Canyon Resort was everything the Desert Rose Inn was not, a monument to luxury isolated from the true essence of the surrounding landscape. As Joaquin's truck approached the sprawling complex, Catherine could sense the shift in atmosphere. Even the air felt different here, filtered, perfumed, tamed. "It's quite something," Joaquin remarked, his voice carefully neutral. "Looks like they built a small city in the middle of the desert." "Describe it to me," Catherine requested, wanting to understand the environment she was about to enter. "Modern architecture, lots of glass and sandstone. There's a massive main building with what looks like 3 separate wings extending from it. Multiple swimming pools. I can see at least 4 from here. Perfectly manicured gardens with non-native plants that must require thousands of gallons of water daily. Golf course in the distance," he paused. "It's beautiful in its way, just disconnected from everything around it." Catherine nodded, understanding the unspoken comparison. The resort existed apart from the desert rather than in harmony with it, much like her and Richard's life in Seattle existed, apart from rather than within the natural world. As they pulled up to the grand entrance, Catherine felt a flutter of anxiety. "Thank you for everything, Joaquin. These past days have meant more to me than I can express." "This isn't goodbye, Catherine," he said, his voice low and intense. "Unless you want it to be." Before she could respond, a uniformed valet approached the truck. "Welcome to Mirage Canyon Resort, ma'am. May I help with your luggage?" The spell broken, Catherine allowed herself to be assisted from the vehicle. She heard Joaquin exchange a few words with the valet, then the sound of his truck door closing. And just like that, she was standing alone in front of the resort, the desert adventure that had awakened her senses feeling suddenly distant, like a dream fading upon waking. "Mrs. Bennett," a female voice approached. "I'm Vanessa Wright, the resort manager. We've been expecting you. Your husband asked to be notified immediately upon your arrival." Catherine tensed. "My husband is here already?" "Yes, ma'am. He arrived yesterday evening. He seemed quite concerned about your whereabouts." That was undoubtedly an understatement. Richard would be furious, though he would never show it publicly. His anger was always cold, controlled, expressed through precise words rather than raised voices. "I'll need to freshen up before seeing him," Catherine said, regaining her composure. "Could someone show me to my room?" "Of course, Mrs. Bennett. Right this way." As they walked through the resort, Catherine built a mental map from the sounds and sensations around her. The echoing quality of the vast lobby with its high ceilings, the subtle temperature changes as they moved from air-conditioned interiors to covered walkways, the changing textures beneath her cane, from marble to thick carpet to decorative tile. Her suite was enormous. The Desert Mirage Presidential Suite, Vanessa explained, leading Catherine on a tour of the space. A living room, dining area, master bedroom, luxurious bathroom with a soaking tub and separate shower, and a private terrace with what Vanessa described as an unparalleled view of the Sonoran sunset. "Your luggage arrived yesterday," Vanessa added. "Everything has been unpacked and arranged according to the instructions your assistant provided. Is there anything else you need?" "Could you tell my husband I'll meet him in an hour? Perhaps in the restaurant. Actually, Mr. Bennett requested that you join him in the Saguaro boardroom as soon as you arrived. He's in a meeting but asked to be interrupted." Catherine's stomach tightened. A public confrontation, then. Richard would never make a scene in front of business associates, which might work to her advantage. "Very well. Could you have someone escort me there when I'm ready?" After Vanessa left, Catherine took a quick shower, changing into a simple but elegant navy blue dress that Maya had packed for her. She applied minimal makeup, a skill she had mastered through touch and routine, and ran a brush through her dark hair. Finally, she slipped on her designer sunglasses, a shield she sometimes needed in unfamiliar social situations. 30 minutes later, she was being led through the resort's maze of corridors toward the conference center. The escort knocked on a door and a voice called for them to enter. The room fell silent as Catherine stepped inside. She could sense multiple presences, perhaps 8 or 10 people, and feel their attention shift to her. The air smelled of coffee, cologne, and the unmistakable tension of interrupted business. "Catherine." Richard's voice came from the far end of the room, controlled, pleasant, revealing nothing of what must be churning beneath the surface. "Everyone, this is my wife. Please excuse us for a few moments." Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood. Murmured pleasantries washed over Catherine as the business associates filed past her out of the room. Then the door closed, and she was alone with her husband. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. "You lied to me." Richard's voice was soft, dangerous. "You manipulated Maya, had her cover for you. You deliberately deceived me." Catherine held her ground. "Yes." "Yes?" He sounded incredulous. "That's all you have to say? Do you have any idea what I've been through these past days? I called the Seattle police when I couldn't reach you. I had our security team checking hospitals. I thought you'd been kidnapped or worse." "I'm sorry for worrying you," Catherine said evenly. "That wasn't my intention." Then what exactly was your intention, Catherine? To humiliate me? To sabotage this deal? To punish me for some perceived slight? She shook her head, remaining calm in the face of his controlled fury. None of those things, Richard. I needed space to think, to feel, to remember who I am outside of being your wife. So you ran away to the desert without a word. His voice dripped with sarcasm. How very cinematic of you. I didn't run away, Catherine corrected him. I chose to have an experience of my own, the kind of experience you take for granted every day. Making decisions, going places, meeting people, without having to ask permission or justify myself. She heard him move across the room, sensed him standing directly in front of her now. Where were you, Catherine? The resort said you weren't registered here until today. I stayed at a small inn near Tucson. I took a tour of the desert. I met people who treated me like a whole person, not a burden or an afterthought. Catherine's voice remained steady, though her heart raced. When was the last time you really saw me, Richard? Not as an accessory or an obligation, but as a woman, with thoughts and desires and capabilities of her own. This is absurd, Richard scoffed. Everything I've done, every deal I've closed, every company I've built has been for us. For you. No, Catherine said softly. It's been for you. I just happened to be along for the ride. Until I wasn't. Even that anymore. What are you talking about? Our anniversary, Richard. May 20th. It falls during this trip, and you didn't even mention it when you scheduled your meetings. There was a pause, and Catherine knew he was mentally checking the calendar, realizing she was right. I've been distracted, he said finally. This acquisition is crucial for the company's future. I would have remembered eventually. That's just it. I'm always something you'll get to eventually. After the meeting, after the deal, after everything else that matters more. That's not fair, Richard protested, but there was a note of uncertainty creeping into his voice. Isn't it? Catherine removed her sunglasses, exposing her sightless eyes, something she rarely did in confrontational situations. Do you remember our honeymoon in Sedona? How you described every sunset to me? How we hiked the trails together, your hand guiding mine to feel the textures of the rocks, the plants. How we stayed up all night talking about the future we would build. Of course I remember, Richard said quietly. When did you stop seeing the world for both of us? When did I become just another item on your schedule, the blind wife who needs managing along with your other assets? That's not how I see you. No, Catherine challenged. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time you touched me like you meant it? The silence that followed was heavy with truth. Catherine could almost hear Richard's mind working, replaying their recent history, searching for evidence to counter her accusations and finding none. I've been working hard to secure our future, he said finally, his voice less certain. Building something lasting, something important. And I've been appreciative of that, Catherine acknowledged. But somewhere along the way we lost each other. Or rather, you lost me, and I allowed myself to be lost. What are you saying? Exactly. Richard's voice had an edge of fear now, something Catherine had rarely heard from him. I'm saying I've been sleepwalking through my life for years. And here in this desert, I've finally woken up. Because of him? Richard's tone sharpened. Don't look surprised, Catherine. Did you think I wouldn't investigate? I know all about your desert guide, this Joaquin Miles. Catherine felt a flush of anger. Is that what you did? Had him investigated? Checked his background, his finances, his history? Typical. You can't control a situation, so you try to own it through information. I protect what's mine, Richard said, unapologetic. I'm not yours, Richard. I'm your wife. There's a difference. Catherine took a deep breath. And yes, Joaquin helped me see things clearly, but not in the way you're implying. He showed me what it feels like to be truly seen, to be valued for exactly who I am, not as a possession or a problem to solve. So what happens now? Richard asked, and beneath the controlled facade, Catherine detected genuine pain. You leave, me for some desert tour guide you've known for a week. Throw away 17 years of marriage for a romantic fantasy. No, Catherine said firmly. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm trying to save what matters, myself and possibly us, if there's still something to save. What does that mean exactly? It means I need time and space, Richard. Real time, not stolen days. I need to figure out who Catherine Bennett is when she's not defined by her husband or her blindness. And where will you do this soul-searching? With him? Catherine shook her head. This isn't about Joaquin. It's about me, about us. I'm going to stay here at the resort for now, while you finish your business meetings. We'll talk more in the evenings, really talk, not just exchange information. And then I want to go back to Seattle, alone for a while. A separation. Richard's voice was flat. A pause, Catherine corrected. A chance to remember why we chose each other in the first place and to decide if those reasons still exist. Before Richard could respond, there was a knock at the door. Mr. Bennett? A male voice called. The investors are wondering if we could resume. They're on a tight schedule. Richard hesitated, trapped between his business obligations and the unraveling of his personal life. Go, Catherine said softly. This conversation isn't over, but it can wait a few hours. Your meeting can't. After a moment, Richard moved toward the door. I'll have someone escort you back to our suite, he said, professional mask sliding back into place. We'll continue this discussion at dinner. I'd like to explore the resort first, Catherine replied. I need some time to think. As you wish. Richard's voice was carefully neutral now. Catherine, I do love you, whatever you might think. With that, he opened the door and stepped back into his world of deals and acquisitions, leaving Catherine alone with the echo of words that once would have comforted her, but now felt like artifacts from a relationship she barely recognized. As she made her way through the resort's expansive grounds, guided by a staff member who had been summoned, Catherine's mind was a tumult of emotions: doubt, resolve, fear, hope. She had confronted Richard, spoken truths long left unspoken, but what had it accomplished? Had anything fundamentally changed? She requested to be left at one of the resort's gardens, finding a secluded bench where she could sit and process the encounter. The artificially cultivated space was beautiful, no doubt, but it lacked the raw authenticity of the true desert that had so captivated her. Much like her marriage, beautiful on the surface, admired by others, but increasingly empty of genuine connection. As afternoon faded toward evening, Catherine became aware of approaching footsteps, familiar ones. Richard? She called, surprised. I thought you were still in your meeting. We took a break, he replied, settling beside her on the bench. He was quiet for a moment, then said, You were right, about a lot of things. Catherine waited, sensing there was more. I pulled up our calendar while we were reviewing the acquisition numbers. May 20th is highlighted. Wedding anniversary, 17 years. You entered it, of course. I can't remember the last time I checked our shared calendar for anything other than business commitments. I'm surprised you still keep the shared calendar, Catherine admitted. It's been largely ceremonial for some time, Richard acknowledged, a rare note of self-awareness in his voice. Like many aspects of our marriage, apparently. The admission hung in the air between them, neither painful nor healing, simply true. There was another truth in what you said, Richard continued, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, about when we lost each other. It wasn't just work, though that's the excuse I've been using. It was after. He trailed off, but Catherine knew exactly what he couldn't bring himself to say. After we lost the baby, she finished for him. 8 years ago, they had been expectant parents. Against medical advice, Catherine had insisted on carrying the pregnancy to term despite complications. Their son, Michael, had been stillborn at 36 weeks. The doctors had never determined exactly what went wrong. I couldn't protect either of you, Richard said, his voice barely audible. For all my resources, all my power, I couldn't change what happened. And afterward, I couldn't bear to see your pain, knowing I had failed to prevent it. So you retreated into the one area where you could control outcomes, Catherine said, understanding dawning. Your work. It wasn't conscious, Richard admitted, but yes, I think that's exactly what happened. Every success in business became a way to compensate for that one devastating failure. And the more I worked, the more distance grew between us until it became easier to maintain that distance than to bridge it. Catherine reached out, finding his hand and squeezing it gently. We both retreated in our own ways. I threw myself into charity work, into creating perfect surface appearances. Neither of us really dealt with our grief. Or with each other, Richard added. They sat in silence, hands linked, the weight of uncovered truths between them neither entirely healed nor hopelessly broken. Finally, Richard spoke again. I don't want to lose you, Catherine. I don't want to be the man I've become, so focused on acquisition that I failed to cherish what mattered most. And I don't want to be the woman I've become, Catherine replied. So accustomed to being overlooked that I stopped expecting anything different. So where does that leave us? Catherine considered the question, feeling the desert air against her skin, remembering the sense of awakening she had experienced over the past days. It leaves us at a crossroads, she said finally, with choices to make about what happens next. As the sun began to set over the Sonoran desert, casting long shadows across the meticulously landscaped resort grounds, Catherine and Richard Bennett sat side by side, contemplating a future neither had anticipated when arriving in Arizona. Whether that future would include each other remained to be seen, but at least now, for the first time in years, they were both fully present in the moment, seeing each other clearly, with all their flaws and possibilities exposed to the harsh, revealing light of the desert. 3 days had passed since Catherine's confrontation with Richard, days filled with honest conversations that stretched late into the night. They had dined together in the resort's restaurants, walked the manicured paths side by side, and for the first time in years, truly listened to each other. Richard had even rescheduled some of his meetings to make time for these discussions. Bob's small gesture that spoke volumes. On the morning of their anniversary, Catherine woke to the sound of Richard moving quietly around their suite. "You're up early," she observed, sitting up in bed. "I have something planned," he replied, and she detected an unfamiliar nervousness in his voice. "If you're willing to trust me with your day." Catherine hesitated only briefly. "I'm willing." An hour later, they were in a private car heading away from the resort. Richard had been mysteriously tight-lipped about their destination, saying only that he had called in some favors. "We're leaving the main road," he narrated for her benefit, as the car turned onto what felt like a rougher path. "Heading into the actual desert now." Catherine felt a flutter of anticipation. "Richard, where are we going?" "You'll see," he replied, then caught himself. "I mean, you'll understand when we get there." The car slowed and stopped. When Richard helped her out, Catherine immediately recognized where they were. The smell of creosote bushes, the particular quality of silence, the subtle vibration of life beneath the surface. "This is where the desert tour started," she said, surprised. "Where Joaquin took us that first day." "Yes," Richard confirmed. "I spoke with the tour company, arranged something special." Before Catherine could respond, she heard another vehicle approaching, then the sound of doors opening and closing. "Mrs. Bennett," a familiar voice called, and "Mr. Bennett, welcome." "Joaquin," Catherine breathed, a complex wave of emotions washing over her. "I've asked Mr. Miles to be our guide today," Richard explained, his voice carefully controlled. I thought I should see what you experienced, what awakened you here." Catherine was momentarily speechless, touched by Richard's gesture and bewildered by the situation. Here stood her husband of 17 years, the man with whom she was attempting to rebuild a connection, alongside the man who had helped her remember what true connection felt like. "This is unexpected," she managed finally. "For all of us," Joaquin agreed, a hint of wariness in his tone. "Your husband can be very persuasive, Catherine." "It's our anniversary," Richard said simply. 17 years. I wanted to do something meaningful." The day that followed was surreal but transformative. Joaquin led them on a private tour similar to what Catherine had experienced previously, but with Richard present, everything took on new dimensions. Richard listened intently as Joaquin explained the desert ecology, asked thoughtful questions, and most importantly, watched Catherine as she engaged with the environment through her non-visual senses. "Feel this," Richard said at one point, gently guiding her hand to a barrel cactus. "Joaquin says it's called the compass barrel because it always leans toward the south. A natural navigation aid," Catherine remarked, carefully touching the ridged surface. "Nature providing direction to those who pay attention." "Something I haven't been doing enough of," Richard admitted quietly. As the day progressed, Catherine observed a subtle shift in the dynamic between the two men. The initial tension gave way to a cautious respect. Richard genuinely seemed to appreciate Joaquin's knowledge and obvious reverence for the desert, while Joaquin acknowledged Richard's sincere efforts to understand his wife's experience. During a water break at a small canyon overlook, Richard stepped away to take a call from his office, leaving Catherine and Joaquin momentarily alone. "This is quite a surprise," Joaquin said. "When your husband contacted me, I almost declined." "Why didn't you?" Catherine asked. Joaquin was quiet for a moment. "Because he said something that resonated with me. He said, I need to see the desert through her senses. I need to understand what she found there." Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes. "He's trying." "Yes," Joaquin agreed, "he is, and that matters, doesn't it?" "It does," Catherine admitted, "though I'm still not sure where we'll end up." "The desert has a way of revealing paths when you least expect them," Joaquin said. "Sometimes the journey matters more than the destination." Richard returned, and they continued their exploration. The highlight came in late afternoon when Joaquin led them to the sacred spring he had shown Catherine during their previous time together. "This place is special," Joaquin explained to Richard. "The stories say it's where worlds meet, past, present, future, all existing simultaneously. As he say." They sat by the water's edge. Catherine felt a profound sense of synchronicity. Here she was at the very spot where she had realized she needed to confront Richard, now sitting between her husband and the man who had catalyzed her awakening. "It's beautiful," Richard said softly. "I can see why it affected you so deeply." "Catherine." They fell into a companionable silence, listening to the gentle sounds of the spring. Then Richard cleared his throat. "I have something for you," he said, taking Catherine's hand. He placed a small object in her palm, cool, metallic, with intricate textures. Her fingers explored it carefully. "A pendant." "It's custom-made," Richard explained. "A topographical representation of this spring and the surrounding area, rendered in silver." Joaquin helped me with the details. The craftsman worked through the night to complete it. Catherine's fingers traced the miniature landscape, feeling the depression that represented the spring, the raised areas that depicted the surrounding terrain. It was a tangible memory, a piece of the desert she could carry with her. "It's perfect," she whispered, genuinely moved. "I've been thinking about what you said," Richard continued, "about seeing the world for both of us. I stopped doing that, and it was a terrible failure on my part. This is my promise to start again, to see for you when you need me to, but also to see you, truly see you, every day." Catherine felt tears spill onto her cheeks. "Thank you," she said simply, unable to articulate the complex emotions his gift had evoked. Joaquin discreetly moved away, giving them privacy. Richard took Catherine's hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I don't expect this one day to fix everything," he said. "I know we have work to do, but I want you to know I'm committed to that work, whatever it takes." "What about your company?" Catherine asked. "Your deals, your empire?" "They're important," Richard admitted. "I won't pretend they're not, but they're not worth losing you. If I have to scale back, delegate more, restructure how I work, I'll do it. We can figure out a balance that works for both of us." Catherine leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "That's all I ever wanted, to be a consideration in the equation, not an afterthought." As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the desert landscape, Joaquin returned to guide them back to the vehicles. The drive back to the resort was filled with a comfortable silence, both Catherine and Richard absorbed in their own thoughts. That evening, after a quiet dinner in their suite, Richard broached the subject they had been circling around. I meant what I said about respecting your need for time and space, he said. If you still want to return to Seattle alone, I understand. Catherine considered his words carefully. I think I do need that time, she said finally. Not because I want to be away from you, but because I need to redefine who I am outside of our marriage. I've lost myself, Richard, and finding my way back has to be my own journey. Richard nodded, accepting her decision with a grace that would have been unimaginable a week earlier. How much time? I'm not sure, Catherine admitted, but I was thinking about Lucia's offer. During their conversations, Catherine had told Richard about the Desert Rose Inn and its owners. To her surprise, Lucia had called the previous day, having heard from Joaquin about Catherine's reunion with her husband. Lucia had extended an invitation for Catherine to stay at the inn for a few weeks, to soak in the desert healing, as she put it. You want to stay in Arizona? Richard asked, surprised. Just for a little while. There's something about this place, Richard. It woke me up. I think I need more time here to fully understand what that means for my future. Our future. Richard was quiet for a moment, processing. And Joaquin, will he be part of this exploration? It was a fair question asked without accusation. Catherine appreciated Richard's directness. Joaquin represents something important that happened to me here, she said carefully. He showed me what it feels like to be truly seen, but what grows between us, between you and me, has to be built on its own foundation, not in reaction to someone else. Richard seemed to accept this. I have to return to Seattle in 3 days. The acquisition is nearly complete, and the board is expecting me back. But I could come back, visit on weekends perhaps. I'd like that, Catherine said, meaning it. A fresh start in a new place might be exactly what we need. Later that night, as Richard slept beside her, Catherine lay awake, her fingers tracing the topographical pendant he had given her. The desert had transformed her in ways she was still discovering, awakening parts of herself she had forgotten existed. Whatever the future held, she knew she would never again allow herself to become invisible. Not to her husband, not to the world, and most importantly, not to herself. 6 months later, Catherine stood on the terrace of a newly constructed home on the outskirts of Tucson. The house was a masterpiece of sustainable desert architecture, powered by solar energy, built with local materials, designed to exist in harmony with the surrounding landscape rather than in defiance of it. The sun is setting, Richard's voice came from behind her. It's painting the mountains pink and orange. The saguaros are silhouetted against the sky like sentinels. Catherine smiled, leaning back against him as his arms encircled her waist. Tell me more. There's a family of quail crossing the garden. The babies are almost grown now. The ocotillo is blooming at the edge of the property, red flowers, like tiny flames against the green stems, and I can just see the lights of the Desert Rose Inn in the distance. Their lives had undergone a profound transformation in the month since their anniversary in the desert. Catherine had stayed at Lucia's inn for nearly 2 months, using the time to rediscover her independence and clarity of purpose. Richard had flown in every weekend, sometimes for just a day, prioritizing their healing relationship over business demands. To everyone's surprise, including his board of directors, Richard had announced a restructuring of his company, delegating day-to-day operations to his executive team while maintaining strategic oversight. He had established a satellite office in Tucson, splitting his time between Arizona and Seattle. Most shocking of all, he had purchased land near the Desert Rose Inn and commissioned this home, a place designed from the ground up to honor Catherine's needs and preferences, to exist within the desert rather than apart from it. I've been thinking, Richard said, still holding her close, about the foundation. The Catherine Bennett Foundation for Sensory Accessibility had been created 3 months earlier, funded by a substantial endowment from Richard's personal fortune. Its mission was to develop technologies and environments that enhanced the experiences of visually impaired individuals, not just making the world accessible, but making it rich and meaningful. Joaquin's proposal is interesting, Richard continued, using the foundation to purchase threatened desert lands and Establish educational programs about traditional ecological knowledge. You really think it has merit? Catherine asked, still sometimes surprised by Richard's genuine respect for Joaquin, who had become an environmental consultant for the foundation. I do. His understanding of this ecosystem is unparalleled. And the desert has given us so much, it seems right to protect it in return. Catherine turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. She felt the changes there, fewer tension lines around his eyes, the more frequent presence of smile creases. You've changed, Richard Bennett. We've both changed, he countered, kissing her palm. Or perhaps we've simply remembered who we were always meant to be. Their relationship was not perfect. They still had disagreements, still had to navigate the balance between independence and togetherness. But the foundation was stronger now, built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to seeing each other clearly. Catherine had flourished in the desert, developing a confidence and purpose that radiated from her. She had become an advocate for experiential design in spaces for the visually impaired, challenging the sterile utilitarian approaches that dominated accessibility architecture. Under her guidance, the foundation was revolutionizing how environments could engage all senses, not just vision. Richard had found a new balance, still driven and ambitious, but no longer at the expense of human connection. The man who once checked his email during anniversary dinners now made a point of describing sunsets to his wife, of noticing the small, beautiful details of their shared life. Lucia called today, Catherine said. She wants us to come for dinner tomorrow. Carlos is making his famous chili Colorado. Sounds perfect, Richard agreed. Oh, and Maya sent the final draft of your book. The publisher is excited about the spring release date. Catherine's memoir, Unseen, A Journey of Awakening in the Desert, had evolved from journal entries she dictated during her time at the inn. Part personal narrative, part meditation on sensory experience, it had sparked a bidding war among publishers. I'm nervous about sharing our story with the world, she admitted. I'm proud of you for doing it, Richard said. Your words will help others find their way out of invisibility. As night fell over the desert, wrapping their home in velvet darkness punctuated by stars, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as an impulsive escape from a neglectful marriage had transformed into a profound rebirth for both of them. The desert had stripped away pretenses, forced confrontations, and ultimately revealed truths that might otherwise have remained buried forever. It had taught them that true vision had nothing to do with eyesight, and everything to do with truly seeing one another. Catherine touched the silver pendant that rarely left her neck, its topographical details as familiar to her fingers as Richard's face. The sacred spring it depicted had been the catalyst for her awakening, the place where she had found the courage to demand more from life. Now, that courage had become the foundation of a new beginning, not just for her marriage, but for the positive impact she and Richard could make together. Listen, Richard whispered as they stood entwined on the terrace. Do you hear that? Catherine tilted her head, focusing her acute hearing. In the distance, the faint strains of guitar music drifted from the direction of the Desert Rose Inn. Carlos was playing, his melodies carrying on the night air. I hear it, she said, smiling. It reminds me of our first night there. The night. That changed everything, Richard murmured, tightening his arms around her. One of many nights that changed everything, Catherine corrected gently. She turned in his embrace to face him. Every choice we've made since then has been part of our transformation. Above them, the desert sky blazed with stars, more brilliant and numerous than they had ever appeared in Seattle. The air was perfumed, with night-blooming cactus flowers and the particular mineral scent that rose from the earth after sunset. All around them, the desert teemed with invisible life, creatures adapted to thrive in what appeared barren to the untrained eye. Catherine had come to understand that the desert was the perfect metaphor for her journey. What seemed empty had revealed itself to be abundant. What appeared harsh had proven to be nurturing in ways she'd never anticipated. And what felt like an ending of her marriage, of her old identity, had actually been the beginning of something far more authentic and fulfilling. I love you, she said to Richard. the words carrying a depth and truth they had lost somewhere in the years of his distraction and her disappearance. "And I love you," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for waking me up, for showing me what I was losing." They stayed on the terrace late into the night, Richard describing the stars, the moon's path across the sky, the silent flight of a great horned owl hunting in the distance. Catherine absorbed it all, building mental images from his words, but more importantly, savoring the presence and attention he now offered so freely. The journey that had begun with her impulsive desert escape had come full circle, though not in the way she might have predicted. She hadn't found herself by leaving Richard behind, but by bringing him along on her path to rediscovery. And he, in turn, had found his way back to the man he'd once been. The man who had seen her, truly seen her, when they first fell in love. As the moon climbed higher, Catherine knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right decision in choosing this new life. Not because it was perfect or without challenges, but because it was authentic, rooted in the truth of who they were and what they meant to each other. The desert had taught her that true vision came from within, and now, surrounded by the vibrant darkness of the Sonoran night, Catherine Bennett finally felt completely gloriously seen. Fin de la Historia. Dear listeners, we hope you've been moved by Catherine and Richard's journey of rediscovery in the Sonoran Desert. Their story reminds us that sometimes we must lose ourselves to truly be found, and that seeing goes far beyond what our eyes perceive. For more emotionally rich stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist with similarly captivating narratives. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If this tale of awakening resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore life's beautiful complexities. What did you think of Catherine's transformation? What moment touched you most deeply? We're eager to hear your thoughts in the comments section below.